So we are going to start with a very good Rosh Chodesh, the after effects of a lively Rosh Chodesh we're just finishing. And from there, we're going to jump straight in to our 3-point exciting journey to cover what's going on this week in the calendar, what's going on this week in the Parsha, and from there, what's one practical, relevant life message that we can take for this week. For this week's Parashah's life, so we're going to start off with Rosh Chodesh being a highlight in this week's calendar. What's special about Rosh Chodesh? We've mentioned a couple of times, a few times, that Rosh Chodesh is a chance to restart. To restart is the idea of why we go to sleep. It's a beautiful idea of why Hashem designed the human condition, or the truth is that most living beings need to sleep in order to recharge, but that's a choice that Hashem made, that we have to recharge. So of course, whatever Hashem decides to do, he can do. No one's going to tell Hashem what to do or not to do. We appreciate that whatever Hashem decided is for sure the best. But one of the observable benefits of having to rest and go to sleep is that we have a chance to wake up. Not just because if we didn't sleep, we would be up all the time, but because if we didn't sleep, we wouldn't stop and restart. Rejuvenating, refreshing, refocusing is important for the creation. Creator doesn't need that. The creation does. It gives us a chance to renew our efforts, renew our focus, and turn a fresh page, turn a new leaf, and that's important to us. So Rosh Chodesh is in a larger scale, exactly that, and it happens 12 times a year. This year we get a bonus one, it's a leap year, and therefore we have 13 times where we restart our schedule and we go again and at it. Rosh Chodesh happens to be in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. They would bring an extra carbon, the carbon musaf, in the Beis HaMikdash, and that set of karbanos was a very special occasion. So I'm sure today, where we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, we have musaf. We had an extra tefillah in today's davening, besides for the Hallel and Thanksgiving. Of course, gratitude is the free ticket. Great lie. Gratitude is a free ticket to being happy. Powerful. And when we say Hallel, thank you Hashem, so what we're doing is we're saying thank you, and we're looking for occasions to be grateful, and that gives us the footing on which to start off our closeness to Hashem, our Zufriedenkeit, our happiness that comes from saying Hallel. But together with that, there's also Musaf, and the Musaf davening is special. And that's tonight, or left over of Rosh Chodesh, yesterday, last night, and this morning, this afternoon, up until right now, where we're still feeding and living off the morning that we woke up, which was Rosh Chodesh, and that will carry us throughout this entire week, including Shabbos, which will be the Shabbos of Hachana, the Shabbos of preparation. What sort of preparation? Hachana, the Kabbalah and Asiyus, Hachana of the Yud Shvat, marking this coming week. After Shabbos will be the week of the 10th of Shvat, in which we mark the anniversary when Hashem gifted us with a gift called our Rebbe. And as a Rebbe, like a Moshe Rabbeinu in his time, and Moshe was a gift to the people. And the people were let out of Mitzrayim, as we'll learn in this week's Parsha, and were led to Har Sinai to receive the Torah by Moshe, and through the desert all the way to the brink of Eretz Yisrael. That gift of Yiddish leadership, of having a Rebbe, is a day to celebrate. And it's also a day to take seriously, which means to prepare for. That's what it means to take something seriously, to prepare for it. And preparing for Yud Shvat, this Shabbos is the Shabbos Achan, the Shabbos beforehand. The Shabbos is a big deal. In most shuls, in many shuls, people will get, those who can, will get an aliyah in preparation for Yud Shvat, get called up to the Torah. There'd probably be a farbrengen in most shuls. And also, it's a time where, regardless of what everyone else is doing in our personal life, it's time to think about what life might have looked like without the gift called Rebbe, and how life has become different, better, uplifted, focused, on fire, direction because of Rebbe, and what can we do to make that more of how we think, more the way we feel, more part of our own life. That's hachana, that's preparation. And this week, as we start Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and we go into closer and closer to Yud Shvat, it's a tremendous highlight. It's a tremendous energy that we can personally enjoy, personally live with, have a geschmack in. Geschmack, I say geschmack, a pleasure in. So Yud Shvat coming up makes the entire month, including Rosh Chodesh Shvat, a whole much better. And as we do, and when we learn the parasha, we look for the kind of koiches, the kind of direction, the kind of message within the parasha that connects to this time of the year, and that's what's going on this time of the year. So let's look at what the parasha holds, and from there we'll pick one particular area. What does our parasha in Parshas Boy have inside of it? It has lots of good things, but in particular we're going to focus on this week. We have the last 3 of the 10 makos. The makos are the plagues which Hashem brought upon the Egyptians, as we learned last week, not just to punish those who had wronged Hashem's B'ni B'chayri Yisrael, firstborn son, his prime child, Yiddish people. Of course, there was punishment for the Egyptians, but also, more importantly, 2 other major factors. One was to set the zone straight that the Egyptian klipa, the evil that the Egyptian, ancient Egypt is symbolized of self-worship, should be broken and should be open to hearing and respecting and realizing that Hashem is in charge. And also the Yiddish people who were being taken out of Mitzrayim, Egypt, geographically, should also be able to get Mitzrayim out of their head, out of our head. That we should get Mitzrayim, the Egyptian concept, not just geography, out of our minds, our way of thinking. We should start thinking Jewish. And to think Jewish means to think Hashem style. And these plagues were set to do exactly that, to empower us. Until this very day, to be able to think like Yidden, we look back and we remind ourselves, each one of the plagues, each one of the makos, how do they help us think more Jewish? How do they shift and change? How do they upgrade my approach to life, to my personal life? And as we look through the parasha, last week we had 7 out of the 10 makos, and this week we'll have the remaining 3. What we're looking for is not just to see how exciting, what sort of movie we can make out of the different makos and how different details and miracles that took place. That also, but in particular, what we're looking for is Toras Chaim, a lesson for life within each one of the plagues. So what were the last 3 plagues? We have the Makas Arba, the locust, and as the parasha describes, it was such an extreme locust plague. It's never been like that, and there never will be, says the parasha. Such an extreme plague. And Rashi points out there was something close, but it wasn't quite the same because you had one species. It was enormous what took place. The entire land was covered in locusts. So much so that they thought it was night. They thought it was dark. It was a cloud, a thick cloud of locusts, of living beings that came, swarmed over Mitzrayim. After the plague of locusts, Hashem tells Moshe, bring on the darkness. And this was real darkness, starting off with 3 days of intense darkness. And then after that, 3 more days, even more intense darkness. It was extremely dark. And as Rashi brings out, how the Yiddish people, during that time, many things happened, good things and even better things, but the Yiddish people had to use out that time to look around and see what was going on, and they themselves also settling the Yiddish people. But then comes the 10th plague, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it wasn't just a straw, it was a heavy blow, and it was the blow of the death of the firstborns, Makas B'chayris. And Makas B'chayris, interestingly, out of all the different plagues, is the one that we have the most time historically allocated to this plague. Not because it took so long for the plague to take place, because the actual Makkah took place smack at midnight. Like exactly at midnight. Chatzois halayla. It didn't take long for the plague to happen. But we start hearing about the plague for many psukim. Because Hashem tells Moshe to tell Paro that there's going to be Makas B'chayris, and he goes and warns Paro, and then between then and the plague actually happening, we have a whole bunch of things that have to take place. What are those whole bunch of things? So the parsha describes that Moshe Rabbeinu gets a whole bunch of mitzvahs in this week's parsha. The first mitzvah the Yiddish people get as a nation, the first mitzvah that we received as a Jewish people, the Hebrew tribe, the Hebrew people now becoming Yidden, becoming a chosen people. Our first mitzvah is the mitzvah of, help me out. Bris Milah was already in the times of Abraham Avinu, so that's way back when. Gid HaNoshe, the sciatic nerve, we have in times from Yaakov. We have the 7 Noahide laws, the Shav mitzvahs Bnei Noach already from beforehand. The first mitzvah that we receive as a people, as a chosen people, is the mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, the mitzvah of a Jewish calendar. Amazingly, Moshe Rabbeinu asks Hashem, what's a calendar? How does it work? And Hashem takes him out and he shows him the moon. He says the moon has been hiding. It's totally disappeared from sight. And now the first sliver of the new sighting of the moon, this is what it means to have Rosh Chodesh. And he shows him Ba'etzpah. You can actually clearly see this is what it is. The mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, the mitzvah of the Jewish calendar, is the first mitzvah in this week's parsha that we get as a people. Because remember, 2-3 weeks ago, we were in Parshas Yaakov Avinu was still around and it was all good. We moved down to Mitzrayim. We hadn't even been through the slavery, nothing. Now, in 2 short parashas, or longest parashas, we've been through the 210 years of being down in Mitzrayim, and we're up to the place of where we're finally about to leave. And it's at this point, where we've been through the Korah Barza, the refinery of slavery that Hashem has put us through. We're now ready for mitzvahs the way Hashem has designed it. The first one is going to be the Yiddish calendar. Moving straight on from there, Hashem tells Moshe, the new moon would have been on the first day of the month. That's how it works, right? The new moon is on the first day of the month. That's when the first day is, when it's a new moon. And we know that we celebrate Pesach on the 15th day of the month. And that's the anniversary of leaving Mitzrayim. So how long is there between the first mitzvah as a people until leaving Mitzrayim? 2 weeks, 15 days. And in those 15 days, lots of things happen besides for waiting for that bombshell of a makkah, of a plague. What else happens? What else happens is Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu another mitzvah. What's another mitzvah? This another mitzvah becomes a mitzvah specifically for that time, for that year. We have similar things that we do till today. But the mitzvah, the next mitzvah Moshe Rabbeinu gets, wasn't a mitzvah l'dairos. It was a mitzvah just for Pesach Mitzrayim. And that was, they had a mitzvah to prepare the Pesach offering, Karban Pesach, which would be a lamb, and they had to take that on the 10th day. It was 10 days later. And they had to have it tied to the bed for 4 days. And on the 14th day of Nisan, which we would call Erev Pesach, they didn't call it Erev Pesach yet, but they called it the 14th day of this new count, of this new calendar. They all took their sheep and they shechted, they slaughtered the sheep for a carbon to Hashem. And they painted the blood on the doorpost, which we remember of their houses. And they prepared for themselves matzah. They hadn't left Mitzrayim yet. They hadn't had yet time, what we're going to read at the end of the Parsha, to leave Egypt with their dough in the back without time to let it rise. And it turns into matzah. They're still sitting down for a dinner. And they have a mitzvah to prepare a korban Pesach and matzah, and not to leave the house. But not only that, they had to eat it dressed as if they're about to travel. They had to be in their journey clothes, geared up for a long journey. And then they sit themselves down, every family together, not leaving the houses, not going past the doorposts that are painted with blood, staying indoors. Complete, what do you call it? Quarantine. And they stay inside and they have the Karban Pesach and they have what we would call a Seder night. They eat the Karban, they eat the matzah. And at midnight, boom. Whilst they're staying indoors, Makas Bechoros hits like a atom bomb. Mitzrayim turns over, doesn't know what to do with itself, especially considering ancient civilizations in which the firstborn is considered the future of the family. But there you have firstborns left, right, and center dead, and Mitzrayim becomes a whole wailing place. And Paro himself, being a firstborn, comes running to find Moshe, says leave, and Moshe says no, we'll leave when we were ready to leave, and that's going to not be tonight, it's going to be tomorrow, and the next morning they're going to leave. That's going to be not morning, it's going to be midday, but everyone is rushing around. And in the great haste of rushing around, they did not have time to bake the matzahs. What was everyone rushing around to do? What was the great rush? They had a whole morning, they knew they were going to leave. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's not brought in Rashi, but Chazal tell us what they were rushing around to do is to borrow and to go and knock on neighbors' doors and collect, acquire, and bring together as much riches and gifts, more and more things that they could from all the neighbors from everywhere they had been. And as Rashi does bring this down, they will knock on the neighbor's door and say, please, can we borrow such and such a piece of crockery or jewelry or something else expensive? And the neighbor would say, oh, we don't have any of that. What are you on about? And they would say, yes, we saw it whilst it was the plague of darkness. You have it in such a closet right there in your house. The neighbor, seeing what was going on, would turn around and say, you know what? Have it. Don't just have this. Have everything I have. Just leave. Our nation has been broken because we are being nasty to you. Take it and leave. And not only would they give what they had, says Rashi, they would add more and more. And they added, and the Yiddish people ended up leaving Mitzrayim loaded up with enormous amounts of wealth, as Hashem had promised Avraham Avinu 400 years earlier. A little bit more. The Bris Bein Sarim was when Avraham was 75 or 70. Hashem had promised Avraham Avinu that his descendants will be going down into exile. They hadn't been born yet, but he promised them that they would be exiled, they would be enslaved, and they will leave with great wealth. And the Yiddish people had to fulfill that prophecy that Hashem had promised to Avraham Avinu, and they did so extremely well. And the Yiddish people leave Mitzrayim. They leave Mitzrayim in haste, and their dough is on their back. It doesn't bake and rise. Instead, it bakes in the sun and turns into matzah that's unleavened. And it's after this that Hashem tells us we should eat matzah to remind ourselves not on the matzah that we ate when we were in Mitzrayim, but to eat the matzah that we ate after leaving Mitzrayim, the nice that Hashem protected our matzah that shouldn't rise. The parsha is not over yet. After this story, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu 3 more mitzvahs in our parsha. Not so much because the Yiddish people had to hear this mitzvah whilst they were leaving Mitzrayim, but because they are very much connected to leaving Mitzrayim. One mitzvah we have recorded in the parsha is the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben. When a newborn son, a firstborn, is born to a Jewish parent, it's a kodesh Hashem, it's holy to Hashem, and has to be redeemed. How's that connected to leaving Mitzrayim? And of course, the answer is the camel back was broken by the straw of Makas B'chayres, where the firstborns were killed, and the Jewish firstborns were not. Firstborns in Egypt died, except for Jewish firstborns. And Hashem says, I saved every Jewish firstborn from dying, and therefore they are automatically consecrated to Hashem. Before they can continue on with life, they have to be exchanged, bought back, so to speak, redeemed from Hashem's holiness. And that's the Pidyon Haben. We also have the mitzvah of Seder night, which is reading the Haggadah, telling the story, eating matzah, and having a Korban Pesach for generations to come. And last but not least, besides for Seder night mitzvahs, we also have the mitzvah of tefillin. Tefillin is also in this week's parsha. Why is tefillin, or how is tefillin connected to leaving Mitzrayim? How is tefillin connected to leaving Mitzrayim? Anyone help me out? Tefillin is connected to Mitzrayim because inside the tefillin it has the story of leaving Mitzrayim, and it's a sign. It's a symbol. We wear the tefillin as pride of being the Yiddish people that we became by leaving Mitzrayim. This is the ois of tefillin. It happens to be that's also why we don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, because tefillin is an ois. It's a symbol of our Yiddishkeit, and Shabbos itself is an ois. And Shabbos doesn't need the ois of tefillin. So that's a little bit of what's going on in the parsha. It's a lot what's going on in the parsha. But as you can imagine, like we say every week, this week's parsha, you could find countless, unbelievable amount of areas to delve into, and each and every corner of the parsha is so loaded up with empowering Torah, lesson, and lesson that we can apply to the here and now. But today we're going to choose one area, and we're going to choose a sikha from the Sikhas project. It's from Chelik Tezvav, and this sikha is going to focus on the Jewish calendar aspect, real reality. Now, that's a play on words almost, because real and reality come from the same word, real reality. But we're going to use this as two different things. There's reality, and then there's real reality. There's reality as it seems, or as the way people talk about it, the way we tend to think of it, and then there's going to be real reality, and real reality is going to be what the Torah tells us is happening. So on this picture that you see on your screen, for those of us who are not on the phone, the picture is supposed to be of a dreary-looking skyline or dreary-looking horizon, and it's thunder and lightning. And if you pull back the thin layer of the facade of the cover, we actually see that it's a gorgeous sky. It's black and white, so you can't see how gorgeous it really is. That's because we're still in Golos. Bez Hashem, we'll break out of Golos today, right now, and we'll see how it's not just black and white, it's in color. But in the meantime, use your imagination. This is what we want to do. We want to get past what seems to be reality and be able to see real reality. And in this week's parsha, Hashem tells us, come read Parshas Boy. Come, let's learn Parshas Boy. Boy means actually to come. Come learn Parshas Boy and see that we have that. This is the energy of today. We can see past what looks like reality. And we can see reality as it really is, even though it still doesn't look that way yet. That's what we want to explore. Real reality is Torah reality. We're going to focus on, as we said, we started off by saying the very first mitzvah that we got as a people is the mitzvah of the calendar. So I ask you a question. What did the people do before Hashem gave us the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, of the Jewish calendar? What did people around, what did the Jewish people do? What did the Hebrews do? What did the Egyptians do? What did non-Jewish people do if they didn't have a calendar?
They looked out for it.
They looked out for it. Okay, good answer. Very good answer. Anyone want to add to that? Put more words to it? I think calendars are exactly that. Calendars, when we look out for what's coming, that's what calendars are supposed to be. Why do we need calendars? What would happen if the government made a ban? No more calendars allowed. You get fined if you have a calendar. Throw your calendar out. What would go wrong? What would be the problem if we didn't have a calendar?
Wouldn't know when Shabbos is or Yom Tov.
We wouldn't know Shabbos and Yom Tov is. And then let's say we hold our Yiddishkeit in a moment. I can imagine a lot of people being very happy if they didn't have to live their life by a calendar. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will be very distressed. But what would be the problem? Besides for mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are very much
You won't be able to prepare.
Okay, you won't be able to, why not?
You wouldn't know when you're preparing for.
You wouldn't be preparing for. So if I say, let's meet up on Shabbos morning, when's Shabbos morning? Nobody knows. Everyone has their own Shabbos morning. My Shabbos morning is right now, and you're going to prepare for tomorrow. But we won't be able to have a meeting. We won't be able to agree on anything. We won't be able to measure time together. So in effect, calendar is an agreed time where we follow. And there are certain factors that it's not only because we agree on it, there are some other things that are very important for a calendar, and that is seasons. Mm-hmm. Knowing when the seasons are coming is even more important in a way than knowing when we can meet up. Let's say we plan on meeting up and it doesn't work out. Okay, so I'm upset. Say that. So we'll try it again. I'll knock on your door next time. So that even though I don't know what time, I'll come knock on your door. You won't be up, so I'll try again. Hit or miss. But if I miss the season and it's time to plow or it's time to plant, and I'll plant in 3 months' time, or I'll plant in half a year's time. Who cares? You know what? It's not going to work. If it's summertime, you're going to know it's summer. If it's wintertime, you're going to know it's winter. For agriculture, you better line up. You better meet at the right time. Because if you can't meet with your friends, it's a half a problem. If you can't meet with the seasons, as human beings, we need food. We need to be able to survive. You ain't going to be making no bread. How are you going to make the plant and harvest and be able to make whatever we need in order to survive? So seasons, in a way, is probably the most important part of the calendar. Today, it's become less obvious to us because we don't live on farms. Many of us have never seen things grow. A cucumber grows in plastic on the shelf in the shop. Where it came from before, and probably from the truck. Where did the truck get it from? Who knows? Nobody knows. Wherever the trucker knows where to pick it up. That's about as far as our agricultural exposure comes to, unfortunately, sometimes in very urban areas. But of course, we appreciate that the sun and the rain are very relevant. And we daven for rain, even though we live in a place that there's a shelter and there's heating and there's air conditioning. We know that we need to have the seasons to work, and Hashem has to keep us safe. You may say, well, today they have artificial farming and it's breaking free. However much artificial we have, we're still not up to that. And even when we do, we'll still need to have the seasons. So what did the Egyptians do if they weren't going to have the Jewish calendar? They had their own calendar. They certainly had their own calendar. Of course they did. Everyone did. You quickly learned from as soon as you were born to go and figure out when it's going to be summer, when it's going to be winter. Otherwise, it ain't going to work. You're not going to be able to survive. But this is the key difference. The summer and winter calendar doesn't follow our calendar. Because the Jewish calendar runs by lunar months, and lunar months follow a 29 and a half day cycle. And we're going to learn soon. It doesn't follow summer and winter. Their calendar does. And their calendar follows the sun. The sun is a 365-day cycle, a quarter, or whatever it is, just over a quarter. And that follows the seasons. The seasons follow the sun cycle. And that's how they ran the calendar. So when we say Hashem made us a calendar, Hashem made us a new calendar. Hashem invented a calendar, not because there wasn't calendars around, but Hashem invented a Jewish calendar that was different to the counts and the calendars that were around until then. Here's the pasuk. Hashem speaks to Moshe and to Aaron and land of Mitzrayim, saying, "This month shall be to you the head of the months. To you it shall be the first of the months of the year." Chodesh Nisan, the head of the calendar and the months of the year, and this is how it works. Rashi brings down right away. Hashem says to him, when the moon renews itself, you will have a new month. Moshe struggled to determine the precise moment of the renewal of the month, and what size it should appear before it's fit for sanctification. So Hashem showed him with his finger the moon in the sky and said to him, you must see a moon like this and sanctify the month. Obviously, it says here his finger. His finger is marabetz boy v'amazeh. Yeah, marabetz boy is a Hebrew term that means you can see it clearly in front of your eyes. You can point to it. It's pointable. And that's why Hashem takes Moshe out. Look outdoors. This is the moon that I'm talking about. This is what Kiddush HaChodesh is. This is the mitzvah. Kazeh re'ei ukadesh. See like this and be mekadesh l'chodesh. Sanctify the new moon. Make it into Rosh Chodesh. Very interesting idea. Here you have something that's time counting, and yet it becomes a mitzvah. Sanctity, holiness is associated with time. And that's a big part of what Hashem is shifting here. Instead of counting time just in order to be able to make money and to make food, or to be able to meet up with friends, now counting time is associated with holiness, sanctity, and as we speak of in time, what's another word for holiness? Without using the word holy or anything in Hebrew, the answer is, what does holiness mean in Chinese? Holiness means godly. Time can become more closer to Hashem. It's more godly. It's more holy means it's more godly. And by sanctifying, by announcing that this day is Rosh Chodesh, which we did for last night and for today was Rosh Chodesh, it makes it into a holy day. Make it holy. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is told. The system of the Jewish calendar, which is a lunar calendar, it follows the moon, it renews itself month by month. Hashem must explain it to Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu gets it and does it going forward. Now, there's a process of Sanhedrin's mitzvah of being Mekadesh the Chodesh. It would be the responsibility of the High Court to establish when Rosh Chodesh is. And as we said, that although when it comes to regular counting of the seasons, everybody's got to know it, when it comes to counting the Jewish calendar and the sanctity of the calendar, there's a different reason why everybody has to know it. And of course, the reason why we all need to have a Yiddish calendar is because if we don't know when it's going to be Pesach, we don't know when it's going to be Purim, or they have Purim there, then we don't know when it's going to be Yom Kippur. You can have somebody fasting and it'll be the wrong day. And then they're eating to break their fast, and could be that's the day they should be fasting. Everybody needs a calendar, and the Sanhedrin would establish the calendar, because ideally the calendar is not a fixed calendar. We know this. We've spoken it many times. We're going to say it again just in case, and that is that the ideal situation of a Yiddish calendar is the calendar that goes month by month, non-predictable. Well, it's a little bit predictable, but not exactly predictable. It's predictable in the sense that the Sanhedrin would study and know when it was likely for the moon to be sighted, when it was possible for the moon to have appeared. And if they figured out that the moon was likely or was possible to appear, they would wait until witnesses would come forward and say, we have sighted the moon. They would examine and cross-examine these witnesses. And if they felt that the testimony was valid, they would accept the testimony, and then they would be Mekadesh the Chodesh like Moshe Rabbeinu did. They would fulfill the mitzvah that Hashem told them to sanctify the moon. And as the Rambam explains, why was it complicated? And the answer is because the cycle of the moon is actually not 20 days, not 30 days, it's 29 and a half days. That's how long it takes for the orbit, which means that you should have a half month each time, a half day each month. The halacha is you have to have full days. You cannot have half days in a month, and therefore 1 month turns out to be about 29, and the other month will be 30. And between the 29 and 30, you get 59 days, which is 29 and a half times 2. So between every 2 months, you should get one complete and one missing a day. One 29-day a month and one 30-day month. How many days should we have for Rosh Chodesh? How many days should there be in Rosh Chodesh? So we know that this month there was only 1 day Rosh Chodesh, which was today. Why do you have a 1-day Rosh Chodesh some months and a 2-day Rosh Chodesh on a second month? And of course, the answer is because when there is that 29 and a half days, so after 29 days, is that next night going to be Rosh Chodesh? Or is it going to be a 30-day month? And therefore, Rosh Chodesh will be the day after. When we have a fixed calendar, we can know in advance. When we don't have a fixed calendar, we don't know what tonight will be. So this morning, we checked our calendar and we saw that Monday night, Tuesday, which is where we are right now, Monday night, Tuesday in the Jewish calendar is already base Shvat. How do I know that? Because it says so in the calendar. But if I don't have a calendar printed, because the Jewish calendar isn't fixed, it's established month by month, nobody would know if Monday night, Tuesday was going to be base Shvat, or maybe it was going to be Aleph Shvat. Maybe tonight was going to be Rosh Chodesh, and it would have depended on if the Sanhedrin accepted someone's testimony this morning or this afternoon, or nobody trustworthy enough came before Sanhedrin to have their testimony accepted. And if nobody came, yesterday would not be Rosh Chodesh, tonight would become the default Rosh Chodesh. So every month we would have a question whether Lamed is Lamed, or whether Lamed is struck off and it becomes Aleph because it's a new month, there's a new moon. So in order to make it work. What they did is they made that every time there's a lamed in a month, just in case it became Rosh Chodesh, they would hold on to it. Maybe it's Rosh Chodesh. Maybe they'll still accept the testimony. So they would go through the Rosh Chodesh rituals in case it turns into Rosh Chodesh. And when it failed to become Rosh Chodesh, the next day would also be Rosh Chodesh. And therefore they would have 2 days Rosh Chodesh. So when there's 2 days Rosh Chodesh, it's because actually it's a pushed off Rosh Chodesh. When there's 1 day Rosh Chodesh, it's because it's a non-pushed off Rosh Chodesh, and that 1 day remains and retains the sanctity of Rosh Chodesh. It became established. So a 29-day month leads to a 1 day Rosh Chodesh. A 30-day month leads to a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. The 30th day, plus the Rosh Chodesh afterwards. Fascinating idea. This concept of having a 30th day or not having a 30th day comes with its own set of complications. What sort of complications? Imagine you are in the Sanhedrin. Imagine you are the chief dayan, okay? The responsibility is on you. And of course, you're a holy person. You've studied it all, you know it. Back to front, you're a great Talmud Chacham. You're the rabbi. Imagine. And the day comes, you've made your calculations, and you know that someone is supposed to see the moon because it's a new month. You're hoping it happens, but you're going to wait for witnesses to see what happens when who comes. You sat in the Sanhedrin, so the whole team of Sanhedrin in front of you, you're waiting, the first person comes in, they're making up, they're absolutely winging it, they're not reliable. Okay, next. I can take the next person in, you're looking for reliable witnesses that come in and they're going to give you the evidence that you need, so you'll be able to be Mekadosh HaChodesh, to do the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, and also to make sure the calendar's on track. You're waiting and waiting, the clock's ticking, and it's literally the last few minutes. Someone comes in, puffing and panting. They've just come from down south, express train up, and you start interrogating them, and you see in a minute, these guys know what they're talking about. 2 of them have seen it. They're absolutely right. Oh, finally, we have witnesses. So you stand up, everybody, come, let's do Kiddush HaChodesh. And you check the clock, and you've missed it by 1 minute. By 1 minute. It's already past the day. Monday has become night, and it's already Monday night. Could you still be Mekadosh the Chodesh? What should you do? Should you say you did Rosh Chodesh without Kiddush? It became Rosh Chodesh, but you just didn't have time to sanctify it. What's the halacha? What should you do? You know now that there was witnesses that it was the moon, and the moon was sighted. It was clear, evidence. What should we do? Imagine it wasn't just the month of Shvat. Imagine it's the month of Nisan. Should you establish Pesach 1 day later or 1 day earlier? Should you call yesterday Rosh Chodesh? Or should you say, no, it's Tuesday, it's going to be Rosh Chodesh? Are people going to be eating chametz on that day, which was going to be in 2 weeks' time? Which are we going to call it Erev Pesach? Or we're going to say, no, this is the first day of Pesach and people shouldn't eat chametz. And the last day of Pesach, will people be eating chametz the next day? Says the halacha. Says the halacha. Fascinating question. The halacha tells us, if the Beis Din did not get a chance to be Mekadosh the Chodesh, like we do Kiddush, announce the day to be Rosh Chodesh before it ended the day, that's it. It did not become Rosh Chodesh. And Pesach is a day later. Yom Kippur is a day later. Whoever fasts the day before did nothing. They have to fast on the new day of Yom Kippur. It's been pushed off a day. That's how it is. The Rosh Chodesh should become the next day, unless they actually verbally announce it as Rosh Chodesh before the cutoff time. It gets pushed off a day. And this is true even if everybody knows, including the Sanhedrin, that yesterday should have been Rosh Chodesh. That's the new reality. Rosh Chodesh is the next day. It goes a step further. And here is where it gets even more exciting. And that is, what happens if the Beis Din announce it to be Rosh Chodesh, and then it turns out that the witnesses brought false testimony, but they were very clever about how they did it. They prepared well. They made up a story that they'd see the moon, and they conned the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin got fooled. Or the Sanhedrin thought that they had, whatever the reason is, even if it was an intentional mistake, and they announce that Monday was Rosh Chodesh, and then it turns out that everybody knows the moon has not appeared yet. It couldn't have been seen because nobody in the whole of Israel saw it, or outside of Israel. Is it Rosh Chodesh? We were saying, oh, look, they made a mistake. Let's correct the mistake and put it back to the way it's supposed to be so that we don't get Pesach wrong, so that we don't get Yom Kippur wrong. Let's make sure to recorrect. And the halacha is, amazingly, when the Sanhedrin announced that today is Rosh Chodesh, even if it's a mistake, that becomes the new Rosh Chodesh. What's the text inside? Once the court signifies the new month, it remains sanctified regardless of whether they erred unwittingly, they were led astray by false witnesses, or they were forced to sanctify it. We are required to calculate the dates of the festival based on the days that they sanctified at the beginning of the new month. Even if a person knows that the court erred, he is obligated to rely on them, for the matter is entrusted to them alone. That is a fascinating, some might say disturbing, alarming, but that's the halacha. The halacha is, although the mitzvah is to follow the moon, our mitzvah is to follow the Sanhedrin. Even if we know that they know that it was a mistake. Wow. This is where we want to stop for a second and ask ourselves the $1 million question, what's going on? Rambam gives us a touch of a question right away, and he says to them, don't worry. Your heart's pounding. You're eating chametz today. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's the last day of Pesach. Don't. Do not worry. The one who commanded us to observe the festivals is the one who commanded us to rely on them. Great halacha. Great angle from the Rambam. Why would you keep Pesach? Why do you not want to eat chametz? Why do you want to make sure to eat Mashiach? So why do you want to have whatever you do on Pesach? Of course, the answer is because you want to do what Hashem wants. If that's the case, follow the Sanhedrin. The Torah wants us to follow the Sanhedrin. Amazing halacha. Amazing halacha. But not without its questions. Not without a niggling feeling at the back of our minds. What's going on here? The Sanhedrin will let us stray. Everybody knows which two gangsters were the guys who calmed the Beis Din into making the mistake. Clearly, it wasn't correct. So why are we doing Pesach on the wrong day? It's a serious problem to eat chametz on Pesach. It's a serious problem not to do a Seder night when we're supposed to, or to fast on Erev Yom Kippur, on Motzei Yom Kippur instead of fasting Yom Kippur. What's going on? What's going on? So the question is, how can it be that the court accords a ruling that doesn't match up with the reality? So to say that we have a problem halachically, we have to get our head around it. We do what Hashem wants, not what we think Hashem wants. But our question is, how does Sanhedrin ever come to do that? I think this is perhaps a Jewish way of asking the question, a respectful way of asking the question. We're not saying how can Beis Din be relied upon, because the Torah tells us to rely on the Beis Din. But if Torah is so reliant on Beis Din, how does it ever come that they make such a serious mistake? How is it possible that they can say that today is Rosh Chodesh when by all accounts the moon was not visible? It hadn't been reborn yet. It hadn't resurfaced. What's going on? So the Sikha has a beautiful angle in explaining this, but the short answer is going to be that it may look like in observable reality that the moon is invisible, but in real reality, on some level, the moon is here and present. On what level? On the level of the way it is in El Yonim. Spiritually, it's a new month. Although we can look around and observably it's not Rosh Chodesh, there's something that's beyond observation. It's not quantifiable by the measures that we have, but this is the reality. And in other words, what we're saying is the fact that the Beis Din were conned by some pair of witnesses is the act of Hashem. And the reason why Hashem made it happen this way, we are absolutely certain that the Beis Din, the Sanhedrin, were directed to be Mekadesh the Chodesh when they did, or to miss the deadline by 1 minute, the way it happened, because Hashem wanted them to get Rosh Chodesh straight, bang on right, as it is in spiritual Rosh Chodesh. The way the Sikha takes it is with the discussion of when the world was created and the beautiful medrash that tells us that the world has two starting dates. It has a starting date of the 1st of Tishrei and has a starting date of the 1st of Nisan. And the Tosafos explains, how can you have one creation that has two dates of creation? How can you have two birthdays? We're only born once. How can the world have been born twice? And what the answer is? Fascinating. Tosafos. Where's the Tosafos gone? Here's the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer says the world was created in Tishrei. Rabbi Shua says the world was created in Nisan. So you have an argument as to when the world was created. How can you have Elu ve'elu devrei lekim chayim? How can they both be right? Says Rabbeinu Tam and Tosafos. Both opinions of the word of the living God. We can never explain that in Nisan, God had the idea to create the world. The idea to create the world. But it was not actually created until Tishrei. So you have Bereshis Bara, you have the way it's created in idea, and then you have the way it's created in action. And the two birthdays are both valid birthdays. Now, if I ask you right now, which one's the most important birthday? When you have the idea, or the way it's brought out in action? Of course, everyone's going to say an idea is an idea until it's brought down into the action. It's not born. But let me try and be devil's advocate here. Not only devil's advocate, let me try and present the other side of the argument. And when we're going to learn this is actually the story of our struggle every single day, every part of our life. This is what we're doing. By way of analogy. So we're setting up a new business. If you want to join, let me know. It's a fantastic business. It's a whole new idea of bakery. Baked goods. And as you walk into the bakery, it's all the best ways. I don't even know what's going to happen. But it's a bakery like never before. We're still in the planning stages. And we're discussing what it's going to be. And then a half a year from now, fast forward, we open up the doors and we start trading. And it's going unbelievably well. In 5 years from now, we have already opened 7 branches up and down the country, and it's the talk of the world. We're thinking of going global, international. It's the greatest hit. And my cousin calls me up and says, tell me, how long is the business running for? When did you open it up? And at the top of my head, the dates are clear as day. I remember like it's right now when we sat down to discuss the idea, and I spit out the date when we had our first meeting. It was at the Starbucks or at the Costa Coffee. We're sitting there, we're discussing Bracken's Bakery, and we're having a discussion how we're going to make it work. But if you ask me, when do we start trading? It's a half a year later. Which is the real start date of the business? When did the business start to form? So the business started to form. It wasn't 7 branches 5 years ago, even after I started trading. But it wasn't even 1 branch when I started discussing. But they're both start dates. Says the Rebbe in text 8, the underlying thought behind something is the eternal dimension, the goal and the purpose. The goal and the purpose of the action that actually turns the thought into reality. So when we discussed what the bakery is going to do, every single one of those ideas that we discussed is what makes the bakery the success that it is. And those ideas that are the success of the bakery were invented, were brought to the fore at the beginning. And those are always going to be the values that our enterprise stands for. It happens to be that it built up and started finding traction. We started trading the first day that we opened our doors was such and such a day, fine. But these ideas were invented from the beginning. And these ideas are the success of the bakery. So although maybe the first bite that anyone ate from the first donut that we made, maybe it was a little later. But the bakery's existence, what it stands for, is much older, or it's on a different date. Nisan is when Hashem came up with the concept of having Dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim, a world as we know it. It happens to be the first worker was only born, it was only created, Adam and Chava only came about in the month of Tishrei. Fine. That's when we started trading. That's when Hashem's doors opened up. But the idea was way back when, much earlier. So you have machshava, which in the words of the Rebbe is not only machshava, but is the purpose, the pnimius, the vision, the goal of what it's all about. And then you have the actions that bring that goal into reality, into tangible reality. And that's creation. So the inner dimension, the pnimius of everything, is the goal of what it stands for, what it lives for, what it's there to do. We have the same thing. So much of our life, I'm busy quickly making sure I do this phone call, making sure I don't miss that deadline, making sure I send this card, make sure I don't upset Yenin, and so many things to do. The to-do list is exactly that. It's a list of things that we do, doings. But there's a reason why those things may end up on the to-do list. And there's a reason why I need those things to get done. And that's the premise. That's where I'm headed with all these to-do lists, is what I live for. And that's a whole different, deeper dimension. So if I'm behaving nicely in class, if I'm being good to my friends, if I'm being a caring family member, whatever else I'm doing, often at the cost of my own comforts, but I'm doing it carefully. I was going to say religiously, but that's it's not the word I wanted to use. Committedly. Those action points are very important, because in this world we observe, we live with a tangible reality, and that's the world we live in. It's the world Hashem intended. But there's a reason why these action points are important. And that reasoning is much deeper and much more important, and in a sense, much more real. So now comes along Kabbalah, is the idea of the drawing plans and the door opens up. This sort of idea is, well, as Kabbalah will say, hold on a second, this is the discussion on Tishrei and Nisan. Where's it going? Here. Remember, Fana says the Torah speaks primarily in the spiritual realms and lose second to the real realms. Why do we do mitzvahs? Why do we do mitzvahs? And the answer isn't just because Hashem has a wish list or a bucket list or something else. Hashem gave us mitzvahs because every mitzvah that we do is wired up. Every time I push the button of a mitzvah, Shabbos candles, boom. Tzedakah, boom. Learning Torah, boom. Being kind, boom. Not worrying, boom. Happiness, boom. Every time after Hashem b'simcha, every single one of those choices that I make aren't just what it seems. They are a working circuit that when I do that, the real reality switches on. The spiritual of what I'm doing gets switched on. How do I know what's going on spiritually? I don't. A Beis Din cannot judge based on some sort of spiritual things. I can't know what's going on in someone else's heart. I cannot know what's going on in someone else's neshama. I don't know. But what I do know is that Hashem has given us physical action points that are aligned with the deepest of deep, the most spiritual of spirits, the most godly of godliness. And when I do these action points, that's what's switching on. So why does Beis Din have to make Rosh Chodesh when there's a new moon out in the sky? Why shouldn't we make Rosh Chodesh when the moon is full? Or forget the moon. Why shouldn't we say when there's puddles on the floor? Or something else? When the cows start saying moo? Why are we deciding Rosh Chodesh based on the moon? Because Hashem tells us that when the moon is visible in the sky, that's the physical expression of what Rosh Chodesh really is going on in real reality. So Beis Din don't know what's going on in the spiritual realms, but they can know when they see the moon. And based on seeing the moon, they say a bracha. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvaysav. We will do an action point that is wired up. There's a living circuit to something that is enormous, much greater than anything we can observe. But we know it's wired that way. However, the world we live in today has a lot of distraction, not just technically, but by design. And in Golus, it has even more distraction. And sometimes the world we see and observe is not aligned with what real reality is. And the way the Sikha describes it is, sometimes it looks like we cannot do what Hashem wants us to do. I'm too tired, I'm too depressed, I'm too worried, I'm too distracted. There's a million reasons why I cannot do what Hashem wants me to do. Says real reality. Says Parshah's boy. Says Hashem this week, come, boy, come, have a look inside the Parsha. Jewish people, you follow a brand new calendar. It doesn't just follow the sun, it's observable. It's a loony calendar. It's loony, it follows the moon. It doesn't always make sense. Not because it's less than sense, because sometimes when sense stops working, when rationale fails, Hashem has our back. Hashem has our back, and Hashem will look after us. Be 100% certain, even though it looks like there's no way I can do this. If this is the next right thing, if this is the next action point, Hashem will make sure if I'm trying to do the right thing, and even if it looks like I'm making a mistake, but if I'm following the Shulchan Aruch, if I'm following the Sanhedrin, if I'm following Moshe Rabbeinu, you can be 100% certain, loony, it doesn't make sense, but it's the calendar of Hashem. It's Kodesh Kodashim. So when we learn Parshah's boy, and we read in this week's Parsha that Hashem invents the first mitzvah He wants us to know as the Jewish people is that we have a brand new calendar. What are we hearing? Says Chassidus, we're hearing that we should use our brain, but when our brain fails, and it's either what makes sense or what Hashem wants is real reality. And nothing else can get in the way. What Hashem wants from me is real reality. Yes, we need a Sanhedrin because we can't make it up ourselves. As we said, there's distractions in this world. We need an Seil Haraf. We need to have Yiddish leadership to guide us. But we are 100% sure that when the Beis Din tell us that today's Rosh Chodesh, Azoidos. And if the Beis Din tell us that Ivdu as Hashem Besimcha, that we can choose to not let the Yetzer Hara get us down. I can choose that. But look at my reality. Look what's going on. Look what's happening to me, to my family, to my friends, to everything I wanted, my dreams. And the Eibishter tells us, boy, come. Yes, you can. And Hashem gives us this beautiful gift of being able to have a calendar that rises above rationale. Hashem should give us the clarity, the fortitude to be able to hold on to real reality and not let what seems to be so real get in the way. And what's amazing is that when we get on track, we start this journey, nothing can stop us. Boy, come along. I hope you've enjoyed the shir. I hope we've learned something, and Hashem should give us the bracha and the atzlacha to be able to carry it through. Once again, we're wishing Hezekiah and his Leah Cohen and Max for sponsoring the classes. Hashem, we should have next year in Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, and all the good brachas. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.